Hello and welcome. I thought I would spend a little bit of time today, and as soon as I can get my camera working, you'll be able to see me for what that's worth. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time today talking about visualization of data using Jupyter notebooks. Now, in particular with Python. So the concepts I'm using here are kind of fairly generic in nature. So you feel free to use them as you will or not. So imagine, I guess, that you've been asked to do some visualizations of some data, and to keep a theme on healthcare, imagine it's COVID, because COVID is a very impactful thing. It's one of those sort of lifetime events, most likely, that will last for some time, leaving a mark on our society, changing the way we work and live, and so on. So anyway, you've been asked to visualize it. So you might start off like most people by using something like generative AI and Copilot. So I've got my Edge browser up and running. I've got Jupyter Notebook running in preparation for what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and ask the question, and I cheat and type it in from my clipboard. So down in the bottom here, I say create a Python script that visualizes the COVID-19 cases by country, and then by continent, and hit enter. And I previously asked it a question, so we're skipping over that. Now it's coming back and telling me, sure, I can help you with that. So while it's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and create a new. I'm going to go into a folder called, if I click on the right one, called COVID visualization or visualize COVID. I'm going to create a new Python 3 notebook because that's what this is going to be written in. So it's still churning along. And there is a little bit of a difference here. You could just run this script, but we'll see what it does. It's interesting with code generation with these LLM sort of applications. So the large language models do a great job of predicting stuff, and they seem pretty real, but you need to understand it doesn't really understand the what it's doing per se. It found code that looked a lot like what I was asking for, was able to do it. So it looks like it's creating some animated maps, so this should be interesting. So let's go back up here. Always a good idea if you do this, and I would strongly recommend it if you do this in an academic setting, give it credit. So I'm going to go into this first cell. I'll go ahead and add one below it just because, but I'm going to change this into Markdown, and I'm going to say this notebook contains code that was generated by Microsoft's Copilot. And by doing that, and you probably also want to do something based on the prompt, right? Always a good idea based on the prompt. Copy that in. If you don't do this, you're potentially opening yourself up to academic review. So if you're in an academic setting, always give credit to where you got things. And so, and I'll go ahead and put this in here, and I just to have it. And then we'll go ahead and copy this code over and for fun, see if it works. We'll just do that first thing, and not surprisingly, PyCountry. So, and it even told us down at the bottom, hey, you're going to want to do this. So we're going to go ahead and do a pip install above this. So you always want to try to keep your instructions in sequence. So it looks like we installed a bunch of stuff. So let's see if that works. And it's queued up. So while it's doing that, we'll go ahead and read the rest of what they have in here. 2 animated maps, where each frame corresponds to a date and the color of each country or continent. represents the number of confirmed cases on that date. And it's telling us what we have to do this. You need to make sure you have pandas, which I do, but also Pi country convert, and plotly, which I may or may not have. It's running and it finished. So now let's try it again and see what we get out of it. And again, queued up. It'll run when when it finishes. So I'm not telling you to utilize this sort of approach in your academic endeavors, but I am saying if you do so, do give credit where credit is due. And so let's just see if that works. So pretty interesting here. We'll start off, looks like by day, and we're going through and printing some stuff out. Now, understand, if you're taking an introduction to Python class and you crank out code like this and submit it, you're gonna raise some concern, right? Because the and just to scroll over here, and we can look at it in the side. This is some interesting stuff. First of all, it goes out and it knows to download from GitHub the COVID data set by countries aggregated. So it went out and pulled it down for us. As I'm talking, it's ticking by, printing out the graph, or updating the graph as it plays. And then you can see the number of confirmed cases is increasing. Maybe a way to speed this up, but I don't know how it is. But it is by day, which is quite interesting. And so now you can see things are starting to happen in various countries. And we're up to June of 2020. And then India is starting to get impacted here. So on. But again, this code is, as we would say in the academic circles, non-trivial. So it's not that much code, and we'll walk through what it does, because that's one of the things that you need to approach the utilization of things like ChatGPT, Copilot, and the like. It's a fantastic way of learning, because it will generate code that is oftentimes pretty close to what you want. It doesn't necessarily really know what it's doing in the sense of understanding the concepts or the consequences of it. It's looking for patterns, essentially, things that have a high probability of being related in some fashion. So that's how it kind of works under the covers. And one of the things I do in my spare time is teach classes on things like LLMs, and it's easy to seem as though it is intelligent and almost a person or something, but you always understand that it isn't. It doesn't understand the concept that are underpinning these things. It knows that this is likely how it's going to work, and they may actually put layers on top of layers in the case of code generation, so that there is a certain amount of higher probability that it's going to be correct, right? But it doesn't necessarily really understand. So I'll go ahead and speed this up a little bit, because we know there's a point here where it'll take off, right? So and also, any of these sort of things, you need to be cautious in assuming that it's correct, because it might be and it might not. For example, on this one, it looks suspect, right? Nothing's populated on the one below. So that's not to say that it's not some interesting things to learn. So let's learn something, right? So up above, we had to install these things, and so always a good idea if you're using something um, to search and find out what it is. So, what is Pi country, right? And that's one of the important things to make sure if you are using stuff like this in a class and you submit something like this code, you better be able to defend that code. You need to be able to explain to your instructor what each line is doing, right? Because you may be asked to, frankly. And it's not that they're being mean or something. Is it's more that it's important for you to understand what you're doing, frankly, and to be able to interpret it and explain it, right? So Pi Country is going to go out and uses an ISO database essentially, right? So and to use it is something like this. So it looks like there's 249 countries. So since we already have that code, and bear with me, I frankly I'm not that big of a, well, I'm becoming more so as things go on, but that big of an edge user. Although it is growing on me. I have to say, after however long it's been out, quite some time. So 249 countries. And to make this fun, let's do it the right way, right? So we're going to print it out, not just have it be the last thing that's returned. Again, need to make sure you're able to explain these sort of things to your instructor if it comes up. And so here, what I'm going to do is something a little more interesting than what that's doing. So this is just giving you the first element of it. So why don't we do something fun like, and this is where it always goes horribly wrong, right? Whenever you start, doing, I don't want to say showing off because I'm not showing off, but for C in Pi country dot countries, print, do, and then I'm going to cheat a little bit here and do the list, but just do that. That work? No, I can just probably just do. Oh, I'm being stupid. Apologies. I should be able to do that. So we can print out the countries that it knows, right? And then so we've got Aruba is first, and somewhere in down near the bottom you'll have the United States here with their country code, US, right? Um, and so understanding that's important, right? Because we're using code, you need to be able to explain what's that code do, right? And for fun, let's go ahead and say this is COVID by country. What I'm doing is naming this, and uh, Jupyter Notebooks does it kind of weird that way, right? When you go in and create a new folder, it gives it a name that's something like Untitled and Untitled 1 and Untitled 2 and so on, right? So anyway, we kind of now know a little bit about what Pi Country is doing. Pi Country Convert, I would just converts a name to a country code. Let's see here is so let's find and PyPy is your friend, right? That's the source of information around your various packages, and also where you go and get packages and so on. So using country data derived from Wikipedia, this package provides conversion between ISO country names, country codes, and continent names. So kind of is going to do some mapping of that. If you have good good examples or good libraries will give you examples. You can probably find the documentation, which is here. And I, as a matter of practice, try to include such things, right, in my documentation or in my library. So here we documentation links, and then in Markdown, if you do a little bash, it'll give us our unordered list. So it's a little better than everything piling up on the same line. So I'm sure I didn't mute myself, although I'm sure each of you are looking to mute, although you have one, right? So anyway, we've talked about the country, and then Plotly draws pictures, and we're pulling in Plotly Express. So what is Plotly Express? Probably, as the name would imply, a way to quickly make graphs is what I would look. And we'll use over here is functions to create entire figures at once, right? So it's creating figures in mass. And again, this tells me something's broke, right? Because there's no mapping. This up here looks about right because we know historically things originated kind of in Asia, and that makes in China in particular. So that is China, so we know that's where it started. So that is kind of leading credence to it. So we were looking at Plotly Express, and we may want to this look our figures at once, Plotly Express or PX, and lots of documentation on it. And so somewhere through here, we're using PX, I'm sure, right here. Something I would guess is wrong with our data for continent. That's what I would think. So probably the DF continent as a problem. So let's scroll down to the bottom and take a look what's in it. It's a visualization problem. Maybe it's a stupid question to ask. So, all right, we've kind of done this one. Let's go through a little bit more here. So we've got get country, get continent, figures. So we've got data. So we've got a data frame. It's in our data frame. And so the point of all this, and hopefully you're taking it away, is that anyway, you need to spend some time. Don't just run the your Copilot or your favorite tool and then think you're done, because you may have somebody like me who says, "Hey, let's talk about your submission." And that's not necessarily a mean sort of thing. It just literally means you did something interesting. We need to talk about what that is. So what this is doing is the apply is a way of applying a function across a data set, and in this case, we're applying it across the ISO alpha column. Right, that's what's being passed in, and I wonder ISO alpha. So what I'm looking here is that this is the data frame, right? ISO alpha is this guy. What do you think would happen if we switch that to Asia, right? What do you think that would do? Let's find out, right? So that, or not Asia. It sounds a little better, right? If you think about what it's saying. So one of those, because maybe it'll already do it because continent is already present in our thing. So let's do a kernel restart all, restart and run all. So what this is going to do is clear the state of pandas or Python. So and of Jupyter. So whenever I did that, it basically disconnected from the kernel, created a new kernel, or created a new instance or a connection to the kernel. And then now it's trying to run all of the commands that we put in here. So PyCountry, that's not going to work. You know why? Because this is in the wrong place. It needs to go down at the very bottom because we haven't done this import yet, right? So what I typically do is after the pip install, if I put it in the notebook, and this really only has to happen one time in your environment, move it up right to the very top, and I'll typically have a comment on it that says something like common in imports or something. As a matter of practice, I try not to scatter it throughout my code. There may be arguments for doing it that way, but and also one of the reasons I'm doing this restart and run all is that because of that interactive loop programming pattern that you have with things like Jupyter notebooks and so on, you have the potential of having something run one time because you did things as part of the creation process in a sequence that isn't going to work after the fact. So you can potentially make a change that it's not liking. So the name value of hover name is not defined on the data frame. This is obviously something I broke, hover name, because it worked before. So let's see, I changed this, right? So what happens if we do that and fix it? Does so clearly it's doing more than I think it's doing. That's again another indication. If you can't change the code, you don't really understand the code, right? So let's try a different prompt, right? So let's say create a Python. Be a little more prescriptive. Script or function. I usually like to use function. No, let's do the script that um, visualizes COVID 19 cases in simple. So really simple prompt and really simple sort of code. And we'll go ahead and stick it out here at the bottom with a message that's something like new prompt, and then say what that prompt is. That here, and we don't necessarily need instead copy this over. So if you're say in an introductory course like intro to AI or whatever, visualization, intro to data science or something, and you go out and create a really complex set of scripts, then you're going to raise some attention, right? And so now that we have this, one of the nice things because of the way that GBT type things work or LLMs work is you can then modify and extend what you're doing. So if you say something like change visualization from a line graph to a stack bar graph based on country. And see how smart it is here, because what I'm telling it is rather than doing lines, I want to see a bunch of little bars that are going to show me over the time what it looks like, right? So again, another prompt, and up here it's telling us what we need to install to make this work. It's using Matplotlib. Generally, that's what you'll want to use for simple things like this. the new prompt and put the pound sign in front because it's a comment. And again, we're still pulling off of that GitHub. And if somebody were to submit this to me, I would ask questions like, well, why didn't you use the same data frame over and over or whatever, or make a copy of it for each one of these cases? Because we are doing some augmenting of the data frame, right, along the way. So it's making sure it's a data frame. And let's see, it's doing some specific countries. It seems like what it's doing here. So let's make sure you can read the code. Always important, right? So we're reading a CSV from this data set. That's good code. That looks nice. Changing or making sure that the date column is really a date. Probably you would want to dig into that, but likely it may not be. So you'd need to pull that in, or it's just ensuring it. Then it's doing a pivot. Okay, now here we're getting more interesting. Based upon date and then country and values confirmed. So DV pivot probably looks pretty interesting. And ooh, boy, that's ugly, isn't it? Because you don't usually use stacked bar graphs in this way, right? Because there are way too many of them. It's pretty, makes some sense, but let's see if we can tell it to change the graph to be by month. See if it can handle what I'm telling it. So what I'm kind of saying is chunk this up a little more, not necessarily make it at a daily level, which is what this is. And again, it's regenerating the code, doing something very similar, it looks like. Copy of our typical sort of thing. Um, uh, right. Month. Copy our code. Running it, and most of the time it's spinning here. Why it's taking 4.5 seconds is going out and getting the data and downloading it. So now here's problematic, right? Error date, and so let's see. So key error, and this is where it gets tricky, right? Indexes by date, and this is also an example that especially whenever you're doing what I've been doing of interactively changing the context of the LLM, you'll oftentimes have issues where it produces stuff. And if you don't run what it produces and submit it, and your instructor runs or boss or whatever world you're living in, you can have challenges, right? Because they're going to ask some questions, right? So let's see here. Why is that a problem? Because we have a date here. Why don't we try the simple approach is create a graph or create a Python program that plots the instances or the confirmed cases of COVID-19 by month in a stacked bar graph for each for this country. Let's see how this goes, because what we're doing here, and there's a reason for me doing what I'm doing, is that I'm kind of resetting the context, if you will, of this, and that's literally what it is. It's the context. So that may help us. It may not. We'll see here in a minute. Wait, we'll see what it did. And interestingly enough, it is working off of the aggregated countries data set. So this should be relatively straightforward. So you're still having the same challenge. So let me think, do we want to dig into it, or I think we've talked enough about what this is, and it would take a little bit to sort it out and a little bit of debugging right here because we've got this. Uh, it's blowing up. I guess just to dig a little bit to show you how you address these kind of issues. This is a stack trace, right? For those who are uninitiated, so it starts up at the top. The error you're getting is a key error. Um, you might even be in some situations be able to ask a different LLM um, how to fix this, right? So there's these assistants a lot of times, and like in Databricks notebooks as an example, there's an assistant that can help you with this. So, but if you're taking a look at it, what it's telling you is that the key date doesn't exist in DF monthly. And so what you would do to sort this out is, well, what is DF monthly look like, right? Um, and it's not a key per se. It's the index is what's going on, right? Um, and another challenge is, can you diagnose the error in the, and likely, hopefully, it can't read my screen, but we'll see. Okay, so this, so maybe we can. See if it's smart enough to figure it out. What we need to probably really do, I think it's a re-index thing is what we'll need to do. Um, yeah, there resample and set index replacing. Yeah, yeah, looking good. Let's see if it works. No. And so the way that what's going on, um, this is the key, and you can see how it's down here, right? Date is the key. Up earlier, let's see, let's get a different data set. So we loaded just DF. We'll take a look at DF, right? So before here, DF, the key here, the index is over here, right? It's unnamed in this case. It's essentially the thing that is ordering the pandas data frame. And this is a pandas issue. Pandas is, to my knowledge, this is kind of unique to pandas. But what they gave us was this resample sort of thing, and we'll see if this works. Uh, Still a different issue. What do we got here? None of date are in the columns, and so this is where what's happening is it's becoming overly complex, and this is getting into something that shouldn't be that big a deal, but you're having to actually make some modifications. We're taking that data frame and doing some real transformations to it. And that means that you need to understand pandas pretty well. So this is the kind of things that you want to be very cautious on. And if you were to actually solve this, you would probably do something like go to your good friend Bing or Google and ask, how do I change a pandas data frame that has key that is date to so that the index is a column, something like that. So we have a date index. What we want to do is the opposite of that. Into a column. Hey, here we go. Re-index in place. So maybe that's all we need to do. So reset index in place. Let's try it. See what happens. And then if it doesn't work, we'll call it a day or call it session, if you will. And it's after, there should be a root by back in this previous. Let's see, we're doing here. After that, this has got the reset. So it's before this. That's the PF. It's this one. Getting it here. Done. Fix wasn't a good fix. So I was going to guess this would probably be blank or empty or just have the date. No, it has the date. And that looks kind of right. So if you see what we did is we pulled the date out of from the side and turned it into from it being the index to being a column, which is exactly what we needed to do. But now there's an index equals. Maybe that's yeah. I think the concept here is wrong. So I would go back to the rather than trying to fix this code, I would probably just write it from scratch. But that's me. So you've seen both the coolness that things like ChatGPT and Copilot can bring. You can also see the rabbit hole you can go down when you start using it to generate code, and especially if it's outside of the skill set that you've got a real strength in. Some of this code's really pretty good. Some of it won't work. It's not uncommon for generated code not to work. That's another takeaway. So whenever you're asked to do these sort of things, keep that in mind. Not to mention if you're asked to do these sort of things with a particular library or framework, it gets even more interesting. So with that, I'll thank you for listening. Like and subscribe as always. If you made it to this point, thanks for hanging in there. I will talk with you later.